we do ourselves a disservice by assuming that we all play the same way.
That's Paul Tarussov, a trombonist, educator, and former martial artist who I wanted to feature on this podcast. Paul originally reached out to me last year to say that my non-traditional approach to high range greatly matched what he had discovered in his own process of rehabilitating his chops from a catastrophic embouchure failure. And this conversation covers a huge range of topics from brass pedagogy to personal liberation, the origins of high range magic, and even the story of a virtual reality long tone app that never made it to public release. So, my hope is that you'll walk away with some inspiration and new ideas, and maybe even go have a breakthrough in your playing or your entire career. Welcome to the Holistic Horn podcast with Paul Tarussov.
Well, it's kind of funny because the way we became aware of you, I'm based in Toronto in Canada, so I'm quite far away. So I don't think we've ever run into each other in real life. But my name is Paul, and I am a trombonist. So I occasionally get confused with Paul the trombonist.
Yes.
I know his former teacher, Andy Hunter. It's a connection of mine. Anyway, so once in a while I'll check up on what Paul is doing. And I saw your name there somewhere. And I don't remember exactly what kind of caught my attention, but I did a quick Google and decided to send you a note. So that's how this all happened. It seemed like you're open to chatting, and I like to connect with people in general, but especially people who have thoughtful approaches to brass playing and how to teach it. I find that, brass pedagogy is a very it's a field that's occasionally very, very stuck in certain ways of doing things. My own background is that I was studying in New York, doing my master's there, when my chops basically fell apart. I couldn't play anymore. And I was kind of very surprised that nobody could help me, right? I read all these books, I went to all these famous teachers, and nobody could help me with what was going on, which to me seemed odd, and it turned out in the end that I did have a very simple, basic mechanical problem that the vast majority of brass players are completely unaware of.
What's that?
It's a little bit difficult to explain in a very short form, but it has to do with the way the mouthpiece kind of connects to the soft machine, and how you hold the instrument, and how you make slight adjustments for different ranges.
Like angle-wise?
Angle can be part of it. I guess the short version, it's a bit technical, so but the short version is that the lips and the mouthpiece actually slide over the teeth a little bit when you play. And everyone makes little adjustments for different registers, for different things that they're doing. And there are actually different ways to do that vary from player to player. And if you start doing it the wrong way for your anatomy, basically playing becomes almost impossible.
Jeez.
And if you do it the right way, it feels really easy. And so it's really interesting because I've been, as a brass player, I've been someone who had the real struggle of practicing hours and hours, not making any progress. Nothing works. I take a day off, I can't play anymore, that kind of thing. And now I've gone to a place where I remember going to school with people who are naturals, and they don't have to practice. The range always works for them. It's just like easy. And now it feels like that for me. I can take time off and play a concert the next day, and I don't need to warm up really. It's a very, very different. I feel like I'm a natural now, just as a result of using the right mechanics for my body.
God. So how did you discover those mechanics?
The most helpful thing for me was getting in touch with a trombonist and mouthpiece maker in Washington, D.C., named Doug Elliott. So I studied with him a little bit. His approach is fairly unique and fairly interesting. And it's a lot of the things that he thinks about and that I also think about and teach myself, they're very contrary to kind of mainstream brass pedagogy. And I think this is why we get a lot of, especially in the classical world, you have a lot of brass players who get a rich, warm sound, a good lower register, and they have no range, no endurance.
Yep.
And they're just struggling.
Yep.
And it's, there's a huge focus on air and on kind of the Arnold Jacobs Song and Wind approach, if you're familiar with that at all.
Very.
And it's wonderful, but it's only one slice of the pie. It's one aspect of brass playing. And if your mechanics aren't working, it doesn't matter how well you breathe, nothing will come out.
Or how clear your concept of what you want to sound like is.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, the more clear you are, the more frustrating it is when your mechanics don't work, because you're like, I know what I want it to sound like, but it's
Exactly, right. And then good luck focusing on music when you're doing that, right? So there's a nice feeling of liberty when things start to work and you can just focus on the music. And that's all we want as musicians ultimately, but it requires some physical training and to be doing things the right way. So I ended up going from there to the way I sort of fixed my problems. I realized I had to quit brass playing or do something else, or I couldn't work professionally anymore. I couldn't play gigs. I sounded great up to like a middle C on the piano, which can't do anything with that. Can't even play most bass trombone parts, I think. So I moved here to Toronto and I did a bunch of research at the university about the embouchure brass mechanics, different schools of pedagogy, all that stuff. And that's how I kind of came to where I am now. So I'm sort of a brass researcher, educator. I mean, I'm mainly a performer, but I do some education on the side, and I like it. I find I can help people in ways that I couldn't before because I have sort of a more nerdy understanding of a lot of these brass things that people who are great players from a young age, who are most of our heroes, they're not aware of them. Yeah. They don't even remember, whatever those difficulties were, overcoming them at age 9. They don't remember how they did it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So yeah, you're performing, you're teaching, you're still researching. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Wow. I'm curious if you could put on a billboard anything for brass players, what you'd want them to know.
I think the main thing, I don't know exactly how this would fit on a billboard, but I think we do ourselves a disservice by assuming that we all play the same way. And actually there are different techniques that people can use to play a brass instrument, and they're not compatible, right? It's like being left-handed, right-handed. And if you try to imitate what your teacher's doing and it's not right for your anatomy, you're not going to get anywhere. And so you'll see a lot of great teachers. They have, half their students are brilliant, and the other half, they hurt themselves and they quit, and they don't know why. And sometimes it's a question of your physical setup, how you approach playing the instrument, and actually what you're doing to play. So that's the main thing. Don't assume we all play the same way. Do what works for your anatomy, for your physiology.
Beautiful.
So, what is your connection to Paul the trombonist? I don't really know what's up,
Yeah, Paul is a fascinating human being. And I'm glad that you asked, and I'm glad to have a place to talk about it. Because a lot of people, they see him and they're like, whoa, this guy's doing like interesting new sort of, what is he all about? Yeah. And he'd been on my radar for years. I had subscribed to his mailing list, unsubscribed from his mailing list, resubscribed, unsubscribed again, resubscribed. Right. And I think finally came across like some kind of webinar of his maybe a year or year and a half ago. And it was like, oh, how to make 7 figures pursuing your passion for music online. I was like, what is this? Because I had already been teaching and coaching. A little bit of my past is that I've been a performer for a couple decades at this point. It was 2006. I won my first professional symphony job. And
yeah, congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Was that in Macau?
That was Macau Orchestra, exactly.
Nice.
And then a year later, I used Kundalini yoga, meditation, visualization exercises, like I really got into the whole holistic approach to auditions to win the Hong Kong Philharmonic. And that was the first time that I had, I'm going to win this thing, nice. I'm going to win this thing. And I did, against a lot of odds. It turned out they actually had someone kind of in mind that they wanted for the position, and they were just like convinced. Which I'm amazed by to this day, by my audition. Because I remember, this is a bit of a rabbit trail, but I remember finishing that audition, the final round of Hong Kong Philharmonic, going back to my hotel room, turning off my phone, crying, and then just falling asleep because I was so overwhelmed and like I
Yeah.
just can't even like
Right. Right.
I can't even be awake right now. And
Now,
I
was this
woke up.
after? Sorry, was this after playing the audition or after receiving the news?
This was after playing the audition. I hadn't received any news. I
Okay,
was like,
so this was just the letdown of
I booked it out of there,
yeah.
man. I bolted out of the hall. I played my final round. I left, turned off the phone, go to the hotel room and collapse,
Amazing. Yeah.
cry and sleep. Woke up, turned on my phone, and it was like old, Nokia days. And it's like, you have
Yeah.
one voicemail. And I was like, oh God, what's this?
Right.
And it was like, hello, this is Mark Fines from the Hong Kong Philharmonic, Principal Horn. Like, give me a call back. I'd like to chat about your audition.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, like you
Yeah,
mean
what's
about the
coming
most
next?
embarrassing thing that's ever happened in my life? I imagine they were going to say like, thank you for playing, but like, we offered the job to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I called him and he was like, you know, thank you so much for auditioning. Like you did a fantastic job and we'd like to offer you the position.
Mm-hmm.
And I went like, I was like, this is the cruelest joke you've ever played on someone. Fuck you, I was like almost like malevolent towards him. I could not conceive that I had won the audition.
This is a really weird thing to hear you say because a similar thing happened to me. It wasn't an orchestra audition, but I'll tell you afterwards.
Wow. Yeah. So anyway, he managed to convince me that he was actually offering the job. And of course I accepted. So then I got in the Hong Kong Phil and later on tried to apply that same mindset of like, I am gonna win this audition to future auditions to great detriment, great detriment, and much learning about spirituality.
That's actually pretty interesting. The whole time you were telling that story, I was thinking, so, I see some downsides to this to this approach.
Oh yeah.
The universe can throw us curveballs.
So I know I'm tracking that Paul the trombonist is on the docket still as technically the main topic. But if you'd like to share your story as well, I'm open to that.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I feel weird sharing this story, but since it's so similar to yours, I think I should, and I can make it really short. But back in, it actually was that year, 2006. I applied to Juilliard for the jazz program, the artist diploma at Juilliard, and I figured it was such a long shot. Like they often don't even have a slot open, even though they hold auditions. Sometimes one person leaves and then they replace them, right? So I did it just because I was coming through New York doing some other auditions. I thought I might as well, and they listened to me for a pretty short time and let me go. So I kind of knew what was up, and they said that they would be, sending out their decisions in April. Okay. So on April 1st at 9 a.m., my phone rings. Right? You see the problem. And someone says, hey, we're calling you from the Juilliard School. Congratulations, you've been accepted into the program. And happily I didn't say this, but my thought was, who the hell is this? And why are you playing this cruel joke on me, right? Like, is this...
Yeah, April Fools, right?
Is this, who put you up to this? Who is this? What's going on? So they had quite an uphill battle to convince me that it was a real phone call. I still don't know why you would make those phone calls on April 1st. It's just like, what a horrible idea.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I wonder if they've like run into that over the years with others.
I do as well. I do. I think, was it Stanford? One of the universities in California, they had a computer error about 10 years ago where they sent acceptance letters to all the rejected candidates and rejection letters to all the accepted candidates, like everyone who applied that year. Wow. So that's the most drastic example of that I've ever heard. And you can imagine the mess. But yeah, these things happen. There was also a great clarinetist here from Toronto who I think he applied to Curtis. I think it was Curtis. And his girlfriend at the time intercepted the letter and didn't give it to him because she was afraid he was going to leave.
Ooh.
And she like faked a correspondence saying he wasn't going to take the position or something. And he found out years later when he was visiting, I think it was Curtis, and spoke to the clarinet teacher there and said, the teacher said, "Hey, how come you didn't come, 3 years ago or whatever it was?" And he said, "Well, you didn't accept me." And yeah, we did.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that's quite irrelevant to our conversation, but a crazy story.
Like, if there were ever grounds for ending a relationship with someone, that's the irony.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. This doesn't work the way you think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To cut to the chase, I've been a performer for a long time, and I founded a tech company in 2017.
Oh, yeah. Is
Yeah.
this to do with Modacity?
That was Modacity.
Because I definitely am curious about that and how
Yeah.
it works and how you put it together as
It's
well.
funny. We're gonna like cover everything and get to Paul at the very end. It was the
Okay.
other Paul, the trombonist.
All right.
It'd be funny. We'll call it the Paul the Trombonist podcast. That's not actually about him.
That's right.
So, but yeah, I founded Modacity, which was a process. I've been subbing with San Francisco Symphony. I went on tour. I went to a virtual reality arcade in Shanghai on a day off, and was like, "Oh my God, virtual reality's here!
Well,
I need to like the music learning potential."
right. Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the added dimension and the immersion and all that. I was like,
Ooh.
God, the training possibilities here are crazy.
Interesting.
I mean, I probably watched The Matrix at least 10 times more than I've seen any other movie, which pretty much recite it line by line. And
it was an important movie for our generation, right?
yeah, and that training room,
Yeah, I know Kung Fu.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, I can play high notes.
Nice.
Or whatever,
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, I'm confident in auditions. So I thought VR was the future, and I started coding immediately. Like, I downloaded Unity. I have a computer science degree. I've been coding professionally already my whole life. And
very cool.
Yeah, so I started building little hacky things. The first thing that I built was it was called Chakra long tones.
Oh.
And the idea was I'd spent a lot of time analyzing the formants and the harmonics of my sound for their ratios to see, like, oh, a rounder sound has lower, bigger, earlier harmonics and less peaks and how do you have even harmonics between sounds and stuff. And so I built this visualizer that the first 7 harmonics of your tone would be, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, coming out as discs from your chakras.
That's heavy, man.
Yeah. So if you have like the fundamental of the sound is the loudest, and that red disc is going to be the biggest around you.
Oh man. Does this still exist?
No. Oh. In fact, I was like, I was so close, but never quite made it over.
Man, because this is one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time is, we're talking about how people play differently. So they're basically embouchure types that people fall into. And, to people who study that stuff, it feels like you hear a difference as well. And something like that kind of app would allow people to visualize that and see if we're imagining it, or there really is, a color difference in tone depending on where people place the mouthpiece and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So connecting the senses is something that's always been interesting to me as well. I'm very synesthetic, and then psychedelics have added many dimensions for me on that as well.
Okay, I feel like we're going to be talking for 10 hours because I have so many questions about all of this, but okay, go on.
Yeah. So anyway, Chakra long tones was my first foray. Never got finished. Really sad. I sat a Vipassana meditation, which 10-day silent meditation retreat, 10 hours a day meditation. When I got back from my tour, and about halfway through, I was like, oh, I need to like pursue this opportunity. Now's the time to build VR, like before it explodes. It's going to get there in a couple of years. And I thought, all right, well, I should go for this. This is my moment. And so I turned down all performing opportunities and like went full tilt as a founder, knowing nothing about business at all.
Wow.
And not really having a particularly good relationship with money, I'll say, at that point in my life. It's something I'm still always striving for more. Like I really think a lot of us have this vision in our hearts of a world in which everybody is prosperous, or everybody who
Yes.
wants
Yeah.
it. We're like mutual flourishing and prosperity. Like,
That's
man,
a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like the Buddhists say, like, no one's free till everyone's free.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't feel like my money work is done in some ways until everybody around me is like
Right.
flourishing. And
Right.
Paul again comes up as someone who's living that. He's really empowering musicians to find ways to add enough value into the world of their unique sauce that they're
Yeah.
able to prosper while really helping other people with their problems. It's so beautiful.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So what? So I founded the company. It was a total failure. I built more apps than I had users. We're talking like by June 2017, I invested my entire life savings, the pension that I'd gotten from Hong Kong Philharmonic. I paid Indian developers to basically not build Chakra long tones.
Oh man.
And then I built another one called Sound Painter that was a racing game. And
Hmm.
you would race down these paths, and but your avatar was a blob that would expand based on how loud you were playing.
Ooh, wow.
And so it'd be like boop, boop,
Yeah, yeah.
boop, like that. And the
Mm-hmm.
path would have these obstacles that you'd
Right.
have to narrow your sound, or and then it would have diamonds and stuff that you'd have to expand your sound to catch at exactly the
Wow.
right time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
Yeah,
dynamic control through
yeah,
a visual medium.
yeah,
That's really
yeah.
cool.
And then there was music for each track, like cool video game music that basically you would play along with, that it was meant to be like, and then the diamonds and the placement of everything was such that you'd play your own
Yay.
improvised music to collect the
Okay.
things.
That's incredible.
Yeah, right. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I actually built that. Like I had that, and that's still on. You can see footage of that on YouTube if you search for Sound Painter.
Because I bet a lot of educators working with children would love that.
Right?
I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Trombone Champ, for example.
No,
Really?
that sounds
Wow.
fun.
Uh, this is a huge, I mean, this could be, it was a huge hit maybe a year ago. Got voted like best, you know, best new released video game, whatever. It's basically Guitar Hero, but with a trombone.
With a real trombone.
Unfortunately, not a real trombone. They were very low budget, so they didn't make an actual controller. You just play with a mouse or something, which I think is the one downside of the game.
Wah,
But
wah.
yeah, yeah, it's a huge downside. But it was incredibly successful. Yeah, I'll send you a link afterwards. Kind of reviews. It kind of took the internet by storm, and
Wow.
it's kind of a similar thing, except you're not actually playing an instrument. Your version is much more useful.
Right. And it was cool. I mean, people were playing it. They were like, this is neat. But I didn't know how to. This is when I learned there's a big difference between making a product and having a business.
Right.
And
Yes.
this is like a typical
Mm.
trap musicians fall into.
Yeah.
That again connects me with brass pedagogy. Is like we spend a lot of time people teaching people how to make product and assume that that means they'll have a good business as a musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not true. You could be a great horn player who like sits in your basement and have terrible business.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. Or you can really get out there, build a career for yourself, even if you're not the best player. I've founded that I basically had run out of money and
Right.
was really stressed working on this all by myself, didn't know what to do. I'd
Yeah.
said no to San Francisco Symphony enough at that point that they just stopped calling me. Just
Right.
understandable, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I joined a startup accelerator and had my first like, okay, I'm gonna be a real founder. It's called Founder Institute.
Ah. Okay.
And out of that came Modacity. That was like three months of like, this is how you make a company, dude. Not that bullshit.
So this is like business training.
It was yeah, I mean, it was like really beyond MBA. Like you're building your company now in 3 months
Right.
or else you're out. And it was a
Wow.
cool model. It was only $2,000, but they get 4% of your company.
Oh.
And so every now and then they have a big hit, like Udemy, for example, was founded through Founder Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get a cut of your company. And furthermore, you get a cut of everybody else in your cohort's company.
Really? That's brilliant. Yeah.
So it incentivizes you really wanting your cohort to succeed, not like
Yeah.
I'm going to push you down.
Yeah, exactly.
But in order to get your cut, you have to graduate. And they started with 42 people in the class, graduated with 7.
Whoo. Okay.
It's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I graduated, and in that 3 months, I did my market research. I made the branding name,
Yeah.
Modacity's great. It's been a great name. And
Yeah, it is a great name.
they really drove that home. Like, you're going to say your company name tens of thousands of times. You want something that's not hard to say, that you don't get sick of saying. I incorporated as a C Corp. I built a board of advisors. I had my whole legal team set. I had a co-founder, and I built product and got my first, 50 users in 3 months.
Oh, amazing. Mm-hmm.
And then I raised some money and launched properly in the App Store after I had my beta test and everything, and had the Modacity story is another story.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
well, I'd be curious if you're willing to take a slight detour, kind of summarize what Modacity is, how it works.
Totally, yeah, because you'll get this. It is I tell people it's like a workout tracker for musicians.
Yes. Nice.
You go in, I go to the gym. When I have a workout tracker, I know exactly what I'm doing for the day. I press start, I log my reps and sets. I'm like, oh, I did this last week. Like, okay, great, go, boom, great. Done. And I'd always wanted that for practice, because there's this decision fatigue. If you manage your practice at the same time, you can't be fully present with what you're doing.
Yes.
So you pre-compute the decisions. So basically, Modacity has like practice items, like things that you practice, scales, excerpts, drills, music. And then practice lists that you sequence the practice items onto. And then a whole practice room that's like an environment that's built for you to make the most when you're practicing. So that's the big one that differentiates it from other practice apps, is they don't have the practice room. The Modacity, you start practicing, you're in there, it's like the timer's there, there's a big record button front and center.
Okay.
There's a notes area where your notes are displayed to you as checklist items you can swipe up on, reprioritize, etc. There's there's a swipe up on the metronome and drone, and a deliberate practice button. If at any point you want to get better, you press deliberate practice and it walks you through identifying the one thing you want to work on, forming a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis. And if the strategy that you chose to make improvement works, it saves it and reminds you to practice it next time you're in that.
So it's kind of guiding you through self-coaching. Nice.
Yeah. And the record button's built for practicing. Like, you hit record, you hit stop, it plays it back immediately. You don't even have to push another button. And it's got, the speed adjustments and everything. And you don't even have to, it doesn't automatically save them, which is nice.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like really just, so streamlined.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Yeah. I might check that out.
I recommend it a lot, and it's still alive. I sold the company in 2020 to somebody who wanted to take it to the next level, and he's working on that. So that's cool.
Congrats. Yeah, amazing.
So anyway, I've been kind of an entrepreneur for a couple of years. I've had a couple companies, and I started coaching seriously in 2021, I guess.
Okay.
2022, something like that. And eventually came to the place where I wanted to do a group program to reach more people. And I was sitting in a hot tub one day. I was subbing with Philadelphia and orchestra, and like taking a chill day. And it came to me in the hot tub. Oh my God, like, I'm good at high range, and I used to struggle so much, and I know how to make high range. Like, I hadn't realized it.
Yeah.
So I launched High Range Magic, and then Paul's helped me take it to the next level. So that's Paul the trombonist. I feel like that was
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really cool. So this is definitely something we have in common, because like I said, I struggled with range for a really long time, and it was the main thing kind of holding me back. And then I got really focused, and I've got to fix this,
And you did.
Yeah, and now I have more high tops than almost anybody I work with. So people come to me for for that. I've never really thought about marketing it, right? So I'm the typical kind of musician that you were talking about, someone who hopefully is adequate as a musician, but I have no business acumen. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, you know. So this is kind of that side has always been very foreign to me.
Yeah. Yeah. How
But
long did you struggle with high range, real quick? Just curious.
I would say um, maybe 4 years, something like that.
Oh, that's
No,
not that long.
3 years. Yeah, it's true. But it was kind of at a very important time. Like I just finished my master's degree and I was starting my career.
Were you not struggling with high range before your master's?
It was pretty good, I would say. Um, but it wasn't great, the range was not an issue at that time. The quality was. Quality and endurance. It was happening, but it wasn't. The sound wasn't always there. The endurance wasn't always there. It was just different. I was doing some funny things, which I kind of wish I had recordings footage of myself back then. So with the knowledge I have now, maybe I could figure out what I was doing. I'm not exactly sure, but it did work for range, but it didn't connect all the registers. Like you and I, we talked very, very briefly about TCE a few days ago, and it's not something I've ever practiced, at least like the Drome Calais version. I think what you're talking about, I think all brass players do. Some don't do it well, but
So
like
real
it's
quick
part
for
of
folks that don't know what TCE stands
Oh,
for,
yeah, sure.
tongue controlled embouchure. It's the idea that your tongue can adjust the harmonics that you are on as a brass player.
Yeah. So I think by that definition, it's something that we all do, and everyone I know who said they don't do that, if when they were put in an MRI machine, they showed that they did, right?
Can you name names for that?
That Maurice Andre is a famous example, classical trumpeter. He said, I don't use tongue level for range. I never do. And they recorded him and went, oh, I guess I do. And another example here in Toronto, probably less well known to you, but Alistair K. Alk, he's a Yamaha artist, trombonist, kind of known for his high chops. And he always said, I don't use any tongue level. In recent years, he said, you know what? I guess I kind of do.
Wow.
So that's less conclusive. But what I was going to say is that I did have a colleague who was really into like the serious TCE stuff with the tongue and all that. He said, hey, like, let me show you what I do. And we were hanging out during a gig and I did some spit buzzing and all that kind of stuff. And he showed me and I could kind of see some benefit to it. But I noticed that when he was doing exercises and demonstrating stuff, he would have to reset and move the mouthpiece for different ranges on his horn. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. And by the end he said, well, yeah, I guess it works for you without doing this, so keep doing what you're doing. So I don't know. I've yet to meet like a really high level player who does like the full on TC with a tongue against the lip vibrating and all that stuff.
You mean outside of practice or what? Because I do that. Like
I mean, yeah, like all the time when you play.
When you play to actually tongue between the lips and stuff.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think you can make a beautiful, have a full palette that you need.
Yeah, so I don't know. People who are advocates, they say, oh, it's amazing, but I haven't yet met or heard one who really plays at a high level. This person I'm talking about is a pretty good trumpet player, but the sound is a little thin. There's certain things that
Interesting
could be a lot better. So
what do you think the greats are doing?
I don't think they're doing anything different, but I don't think they're doing that.
Yeah. Because you do look at some of these players, like Joe Alessi comes to mind, or Tom Hooten, for example.
Tom Hooten, I'm not familiar with.
Oh, Tom is a principal trumpet in LA Philharmonic and just monster. Like what? I mean,
right.
The sound. The sound.
Yeah.
The technique, the dedication. Really, truly a brass athlete, but of the highest musical caliber.
Right. Oh, I'll check him out.
Yeah.
Is he an educator as well?
He is. He's a very active educator. We were actually in talks about him becoming a co-founder for Modacity because we had such similar ideas.
That's super interesting. I will check him out. I'm always curious to see, how people teach and approach these things, and people who are great players as well as great educators are very rare. In my experience. So that's like a golden thing when you find that.
Why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with what we were talking about earlier. A lot of the greats, they kind of hit on the right things very early on. They had training from an early age, and they don't understand what it's like not to be a natural, as they say. A perfect example, Wynton Marsalis, he had an infection on his lip and he needed surgery at some point. I think it was about 15 years ago, a little more, almost 20 years ago. I haven't talked to him about this personally, but I saw an interview and I talked to some of his students, and it was really interesting because he was at that time, I don't know exactly how old he is, but he might have been like 45 or 50. So, mid-career or certainly not starting out, been playing for decades. And after the surgery, trying to come back and trying to play, he said something like, this is not a direct quote, but something like, for the first time in my life, I'm realizing that it's not just about hard work. Like, you can practice really hard and you can not get better. And now, whenever I looked at people who weren't getting better, I was like, you just need to practice more. You just need to practice harder. And now I'm really feeling where if I don't do it quite right, I don't make progress, really about having the right approach and doing the right thing, then you get ahead. And it was really interesting that somebody like Wynton Marsalis, had to get injured kind of late, relatively speaking, in his career to realize that, because it always worked for him up until then, right?
I have so many emotions right now. I'm like, I like have like a 5 foot thick lead wall of containing boundary of like fire and rage and
exactly.
sadness and grief that is evoked from me right now. Of like, God, it's so I've so many times that I practiced so hard.
Yes.
And got worse.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So painful. And so many people out there have done that.
I mean, that was when my chops were broken down. I practiced more than I ever practiced, and I was not getting any better. And I really kind of regret that, because I did some damage to my body and psychologically, emotionally, it changed a lot of things for me, right? I almost stopped associating practicing with getting better altogether, which is kind of harmful for my future progress. But, but I had all this energy and the time that I don't have now. So kind of was lost in a sense. And I could have made a lot more progress with what I know now, with less effort.
Yeah. I was just practicing for an audition, and I remember there's this Till Eulenspiegel excerpt. And a month ago, I could not play that thing. There were like serious issues in my, like, if you asked me to play that at speed, it would like 40% of the notes would not come out.
Oh, right.
It was in a weird range for me.
I've never tried playing it, but I've heard many people try and fail. So I can imagine how difficult it is.
You know what? And I was like, all right, let's do this thing. I started from the end, right? Last 4 notes, last 5 notes, last 6 notes. Work, some ancillary like etude type practice on the skills, on the range, blah, blah, blah. And within 2 weeks, I was playing it slowly but perfectly. Within 3 weeks, I was playing it quickly. And within 4 weeks, I was crushing it.
Right.
And I played it at an audition yesterday. I played prelims, I made it semis, I made it to finals, I played it in finals. And just nailed, like, it was the best excerpt of my entire day.
Yeah, man. That's so satisfying.
Yeah, so like that, man, when you practice and it's just like, boom, progress city.
Yeah.
That's what I'm all about.
Yeah, when you're doing it the right way, right? And sometimes it's subtle things. I had a similar experience with, I learned to double tongue and doodle tongue when I was very young. And as a result, my single tonguing never got quick, because I would just go to that, right? So I had a really lazy kind of single tongue. And at some point I decided, I gotta fix this. And I spent a long time, 8-9 years, like chipping away at the single tongue, and it wasn't getting better. Like, it wasn't getting better at all. And after so many years, I put in so much work and no improvement. Maybe it's a consistency thing, like, I don't know. So I said, okay, I'm only allowed to practice this for 2 minutes a day, but it has to be every day. And like within 2 months, I made more progress than I made in 8 years,
Were you
right?
practicing differently, or was it just the
I
consistency?
think it was just inconsistent. I'd like spend a lot of time on it and then not touch it for a week. And
Uh,
it seems like the tongue can be trained easily, but it also detrains quickly,
hmm.
is sort of my impression. It's not a scientific opinion. I don't know, it's just subjective. But so suddenly, yeah, suddenly it's a question of finding the thing that helps you break through sometimes. And not always obvious what it is. In this case, I think it was consistency, because otherwise I don't know why just doing it for 2 minutes a day suddenly made such a difference.
Mm.
And 2 minutes is nothing, right?
It's very, very short amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like Modacity for that. Because
Mm,
I'll create like a 30-minute routine that has like 2 minutes of XYZ, 2 minutes of blah blah
right,
blah,
right.
and just hit start and it like walks me through it. You know,
Nice.
it's that's the
Is
whole
that
point.
is that what you use in some of your videos?
Hmm.
Because I watched like you had like a practice routine for high range, and there's a timer going.
Oh no, that's actually Seconds Pro,
Okay.
which is free. The reason I do that is because
It's a
first
great
of
way to
all,
organize your presentation, right?
yeah. First of all, Seconds it like automatically progresses through, and I think Modacity, I can't remember if we might have built a setting to skip the star rating, but normally it asks you to rate it and
Right.
give stars to it. But Seconds is just easier, simpler interface. Yeah. I'm tracking a topic that I would love to cover, which is because nobody ever asks me about somatics and martial arts.
Okay, excellent. I want you to talk about what the word somatic even means to you.
Mm.
It's not a word I often use. I ended up using it in my research to differentiate, kind of concrete physical training for brass players based on mechanics compared to a more sort of intuitive musical approach, which is equally important, but I wanted to be clear which one I was talking about. I don't know any brass players who are martial artists, I don't think, but when I was young, it was my thing. Like I studied Okinawan karate at an early age, and it was like the main thing in my life.
Mhm.
I competed some major competitions and stuff like that. And then I had a horrible skiing accident. I broke my leg. I had a cast up to my hip. I was bedridden. And that is how I transitioned actually from martial arts to do music instead.
You're like, great, I only need one hand for trombone.
Kind of, yeah, yeah. So there were other coincidences, but that was kind of a big thing. So I'm really curious. It's kind of like a thing in my past that I think about returning to, and I never have. But
Mm.
I feel like it kind of changed me as a person to study that. So I'm
Mm.
really curious, So yeah, so what does somatic mean to you, and what is the relationship for you between the martial arts and the music and the brass playing?
Oh, so such a rich area of exploration.
Yeah.
And somatics and martial arts connects. I'm just realizing this talking with you. So I'll give my brain's churning on this as you were
Yeah.
introducing your curiosity, and I thought, yeah, so there's proprioception, which
Hmm.
is knowing where your body is in space,
Yeah.
and there's interoception,
Mm.
which is being able to sense what's happening inside your body.
Okay.
Like I
Huh.
feel a little bit of butterflies in my stomach right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel some
Uh-huh.
tension on my right shoulder blade.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you notice in your body right now?
It's similar. I'm I also have like that butterflies feeling. I might be hungry. I haven't eaten anything yet today.
Mhm.
But I think I'm also excited about a conversation. And I feel kind of a little tense, a little heavy up
Mhm.
here. I think
Mhm.
I've been kind of involved in a lot of hunched over activities, and it doesn't
Mm.
feel natural and balanced. Um,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
yeah, very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Um,
So to me, somatics is like the exploration of where cognition meets body. It's like
okay.
body-based intelligence. And so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just proprioception of like, oh, where's my arm in space? But like when my arm is here in space, what does that feel like? Right?
Yeah, right.
What happens in my cognition and my being and my emotions? And
Hmm.
and it's so fascinating. There's a whole realm of therapy called somatic therapy, somatic psychotherapy, which is based on body-based inquiry. So when you think about a traumatic event or whatever, it's often you're trying to resolve trauma. It's like, how do you feel? What do you feel in your body right now? I can think of times when I want to go like this, right?
Yeah.
You notice there's like, I just want to close down. And then a somatic therapist might say, okay, great, like let's hold that for a second,
Mm-hmm.
and just see what's it like to be in that position for a minute,
Yeah.
I do this a lot with my horn students, where I'll see them make a micro gesture on their face of like dread or horror or something.
Right.
Like,
Oh no.
hold on. Like, let's make that expression just right.
Like lean
Because
into it.
people do that when they try to play high. They'll spread like that. Which
Right.
actually, if you take it to its extreme, like what kind of emotion am I expressing right now?
I'm not sure what that is, but it's not a good one.
How would you interpret it?
Um, disgust, maybe?
Disgust? Yeah.
Mhm.
Horror?
Yeah.
Disgust? Like contempt?
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, I was like, is it any wonder you're disgusted by your high range?
Right.
Someone recently told me that I look like I'm smiling all the time when I play my horn. And I'm like,
Really?
yeah, it's because I'm like happy when I play my horn.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, hopefully they're referring to your eyes and not your mouth.
They were referring to my mouth.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and my mouth does. It turns up in a little happy smile when I play my instrument. A little bit.
Interesting.
A little bit. I don't know. Anyway, there's limits. There's limits to the comparisons, and sometimes it's a stretch to say, okay,
Yeah.
well, you're frowning with your face while you play your horn, so you've got to be unhappy while you do that. But there is that research about if you're feeling unhappy and you force a smile, it makes you
Yes.
happier.
Yes. That I have experimented with away from the instrument. The last thing I need to do while playing is smile. Is
Yeah.
I need the opposite, but I feel that emotional connection to the body, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it, you're frowning, there's 2 hours a day because your chops happen to put you in a frown. Do you really think that's not going to affect your mood?
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So that's somatics, is this inquiry, and it's touched on from martial arts, and yoga was my Alexander technique, is a somatic inquiry. It just doesn't call itself that. Feldenkrais, all that.
Right.
Yeah. And that was my journey, was first Alexander technique and then yoga. And then I was having terrible back pain in Hong Kong. And I went to
This is great. This is one of the things I wanted to ask you about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
About back pain?
Not specifically back pain, because I didn't know it was back pain, but I read something on your website about you going through a period of some sort of chronic pain and misalignment, and presumably you dealt with it. So that's an interesting thing.
I still experience some pain, way less, but I went to this Pilates studio to inquire about my back pain, and I had the intro session with the whatever co-owner of the studio, and her husband came by and was like, hey man, I want to talk to you for a second. I was like, okay. I was like,
I got something for you, kid.
Yeah, he's like, so you're having some back pain, huh? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I think I have something for you that's better than Pilates. And I'm like, what is it? And he's like, it's called Wing Chun Kung Fu.
Oh.
Come here for a second. Stand like this. And stand like this. And gave me like this whole intro to Wing Chun. What's it about? And Wing Chun, it's all about like totally relaxing from your perineum, and then having this like barber pole of energy going up your spine. That's like that's a upward lift, and then everything falling off, relaxation, the waterfall, and then moving really, really relaxedly from this like aligned central place, multiplying joint forces. And so there's this way, like for a horn, we're holding it up to generate this upward force. It's a move in Wing Chun called Bong Sao. it's just rotating forward, up and forward, and there's a shoulder rotation and
Right.
the elbow and the wrist, and it's like perfect for French horn playing. Doing
Right.
it in the French horn,
Right.
and this one as well needs to hold that. And so how do you connect that weight through the arms, down the back, into the
Mm.
sacrum, pelvis, hips, distribute it down into the feet and ground? And the Sifu the Qigong, the master, was this 93-pound man, and they'd put him on a scale and have someone push into him,
Yeah.
and he would ground the weight, and the weight on the scale would go up.
Whoa. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
It's like
that,
some incredible control over the transference. That's
yes,
really interesting.
it's
Yeah.
like some kind of kung fu.
Oh man, it's amazing. It also sounds very compatible with Alexander technique, what you're describing.
Super compatible.
Mm.
Very internal inquiry. I would have this Alexander wizard work on me. Alex Farkas was his name at Bard College. He touched my shoulder. He'd go, "I'm sending a message to your hip." And then
That's great.
I feel my hip go. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So that's just blew my mind. I had so many insights, so many moments of like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. I don't know. What was
I lo-
your, like, have
That
you
stuff can go
connected
really deep.
martial arts and brass playing?
You know, it's weird that I haven't really. And it's funny because I've had conversations with people who have kind of two fields of passion within their life, and
Mhm.
I say, well, what do you think about how do they connect each other? And they go, oh, I never thought of that, and I think, oh, well, you're stupid. How could you not make the? But here I am going, yeah, I never really, thought about it very consciously. I think subconsciously it really affected me because what I got out of my martial arts practice, it was very traditional, which is part of the reason I didn't do it after that. Is you'd have these schools that clearly were kind of this westernized, let's make money off people,
Mhm.
make it a sport, teach them things that look cool. It was very different, and it kind of was off-putting to me. Um, I'm not saying there's no value in martial arts as a sport, but it wasn't what I had gotten. And for me, I think as a kid, it was incredibly powerful, just a sense of discipline, a sense of control over your emotions. Um, right? You
Mm.
have to be able to be calm, to be still, and then to move with intention
Mm.
and maybe generate a lot of force, which is sort of like anger. I didn't do this very much because they said the children they didn't, but they have tests where you have to break a plank or
Yeah.
brick or something, and it's really you have to sort of control your. I don't know if it's actually anger, but it's something very similar to anger in that moment of being able to project violence against something that's scary to you,
Destruction. Yeah. To destroy something.
to destroy, but also it's the fear of it, right? Like
Mm.
there's a lot of fear about putting your fist through a piece of wood. You could break your
Sure.
hand. Um,
Wow.
so I found that it was very sort of emotionally, it changed me. Like I remember, for example, when I was a kid at school, I was never a violent kid anyway, but I would get into fights occasionally, just like all kids did at that time. Maybe schools are more civilized now, I don't know. And then after I started studying martial arts, uh, I was never in a fight again in my whole life.
Wow. Wow.
And it's funny because they told me that would happen. It wasn't a conscious decision or anything, but something shifted in the way I relate to myself and others. So when it comes to brass playing, there isn't anything that I've consciously brought in, and I never considered this question until I
Mm.
contacted you and said, hey, let's chat about it, because I don't think I've met any brass players who do martial arts.
Can I share
Maybe,
one concept with you that feels super resonant?
yes, please.
And I have a full video about this on my YouTube. It's called Nimlik or Nian Li, which is mind force or like
Okay.
conceptual force is how you might translate it. And we would do this. I don't even know where I want to back up, how I want to start. But basically, one of the big things in Wing Chun, we're aligning the center line of our fist with the center line of our body. And
Okay.
then I'm just like rotating in my shoulder and trying to punch out forward, nice and slow. It's part of the form.
Okay.
And the instructor will come up and put his hand against your fist, and then you're supposed to, push
Without
it,
rotating your body.
expand it. Oh no, yeah, you don't rotate your body.
Okay.
Yeah, you always face your center towards the target. Exactly. So it's like there's this triangle basically. If you imagine from the shoulders to this point in front of you,
Right.
and that's like the attack triangle. It's
Yeah,
just
that
always
was
yeah.
that was similar in karate, except you would never start here.
Right, yeah, in karate you kind of start like
At the hip, actually.
at the hip.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting. Wow. So
So
that's a shape, that's like a spirally shape. It
well,
seems like.
it's the same shape that you're describing, but yeah, there's a bit of a, because your fist will rotate.
And then come back to your hip. Wow.
Yeah. So the punch
Wow.
is thrown from the hip.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Very interesting. So anyway, you have this triangle, and we're going straight forward, and he's resisting your fist.
Yeah.
And if you kind of like, if you really push against it, if you imagine them, you're like just
Right.
naively push, what happens is your shoulder kind of locks
Yeah.
up, and you get this tension and everything locks.
Yes.
There's not a lot of force. A dude can stop your arm.
Yeah, this is a very like disadvantageous position to be in when you're trying to push from here.
Yeah, exactly. Theoretically. So, but it's not, it ends up not being so. And if you can relax. So inevitably I wouldn't be going forward at all. He'd go relax, fang song, I relax my arm. And then instead you're aiming to just like rotate here rather than push from here.
Okay.
Rotate there.
Yeah.
At the same time, your elbow's opening. So it's kind of like, right?
Yeah.
That's the move. That's the move.
Right.
And when you do that, he would just like stagger backwards. It was amazing. And
Wow.
I was like, are you fooling me? Like, is it
Yeah,
really
yeah,
that
yeah.
big of a difference? But I've experienced it enough on the other side of things, and also to people that are naive. Like, I'll just, hey, I'm going to show you a trick right now. Like, resist me, and I'll show them the one way, and I'll show them the other way, and inevitably they like go flying off in whatever direction.
Yeah.
When I use the Nimlik. And the way that they talk about making it happen is that you don't try to move your arm at all. Instead, you simply imagine the arm moving. You imagine the joints rotating, and you sort of will it to happen without forcing it to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the concept force. I was in a bad accident as well that could have ended my martial arts career, actually. And I was laid up in bed, a broken collarbone. And I would just imagine doing the martial arts forms. Imagine doing the form with my right arm, laying there, and my collarbone would start searing pain.
Yeah, I was gonna say it must hurt even just to imagine it, right?
Just to imagine it, like all the nerves were firing and everything.
Right.
Wild.
Whew.
So I talk a lot about energy body stuff now, because that convinced me that the energy body is a real thing.
I see.
Yeah, I think I talk about energy horn. Like, if you imagine right now that you kind of have like Shiva arms, like a bunch of arms that are kind of energetic arms, and then you've got like an energetic trombone in your arms, and it's holding the trombone in front of your face, and that you can play that energetic trombone and what it's like. And you probably notice things like shift inside your system as you do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, wow, what can we do with this? That's fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that.
So that mind force is basically the thing that got me to stop forcing on the instrument. Of saying, rather than doing the equivalent of locking up my shoulder and pushing, I'm just gonna will the note to come out at its own pace. And when people do that, then they tend to chill out and find more ease.
Right. I think that when we're efficient with a movement, right, it can be quite powerful, but it can feel relaxed at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't actually mean that you are relaxed in a sense. It's just you're putting the tension in the right place to get the result that you need.
You mentioned moving with intention from your center, I believe.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
In karate.
Uh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you're like, oh, you're moving like intentionally. I mean, do you feel like that's automatically translated to your trombone playing? Do you, when you intentionally produce something?
Um, I think so, yes. I think there's a similarity there in martial arts training, right? You might have to be completely still, and you might have to perform a certain movement, and you need to be in control of that, which is both physical and mental. And that's very similar to kind of effective brass playing, where you have a certain goal, you need to execute a certain set of movements, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
term for it. And then if you do it, it comes out and it feels easy. And you can't be doing a bunch of extraneous things, right? It's going to interfere with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real similarity there of kind of knowing what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then doing it with ease.
I'm wondering what the equivalent of breaking bricks or boards is in brass playing.
Ah, right. I mean, this sort of sounds very shallow, perhaps, but I feel that sometimes on a gig where you got to nail a high F at the end of the gig and you're tired, and you know you know it's an important musical moment, so you don't want to miss it, and you have no idea if it's going to come out because maybe it's beyond the limits, at your limits anyway, but now you've been playing for 3 hours and you don't have much left. Some of that feels a bit similar. It's not quite the same thing, but there's a thing where you just when it feels good and you can just trust that it's going to work, and then it's very satisfying. Oh, it did work! Wow.
Yeah.
You're going to surprise yourself.
There's something about playing loud for me where I notice very, very different approaches. One is like where I like kind of let it happen. And it's that kind of force that actually breaks the board versus the kind of like when you
yeah.
the tension that like your fist hits the board and you're like, ow.
Yeah. Well, so I know that, in martial arts, that's very much about, you have to sort of play a mental trick on yourself, right? You have to believe that your fist is going to go through the board, and if you don't, it's not going to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many people, I need to double click on this. So many people in the horn world say, I can't believe that I can play high if I don't see the evidence first. And I keep saying you have to believe it to see it, not the other way around.
Wow, that's such a strange attitude. Huh. I mean, I guess it's human, but it's so bizarre. It's like, if I haven't done it yet, then I can't do it, right? That's sort of what they're saying.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who has that limitation?
Well, it's the same thing we're talking about, right? They're holding themselves back from whatever they could do if you just assume you can't. I find that a lot of range development is literally people just putting limitations on themselves. I hear a lot of people go, oh, well, I practice out of this book and it goes to C sharp. That's the highest note. So I've never even tried playing a D. Like, well, why not? If you can play C sharp, you can probably play a D, right? I go, oh, wow. Or they think of, this is the highest note on my instrument, I don't go any higher.
Wow.
Well, why not? Right? Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing, like, keep going. And it's happened to me even recently. I don't know if you ever heard of Marshall Jilks. He's a great trombonist. And I went to school with him, and it was very intimidating. He's such a great brass player, so consistent, so strong, so flexible, everything. And he put out a routine recently where you can kind of play along with him in a video. I thought, oh, this is cool, because he'd shown me some of those things when we were at school together. But it's just easier because you just click on a button and the music's on the screen and you hear him play it and go along. And he was doing all these scales into the upright. So he has amazing high chops, some of the best in the business, And I was doing the routine and I would get really burned out, like, because it just goes and goes. I suspect that when he recorded it, he took breaks, but you're not going to leave those in the video. And then I know a couple of weeks ago, I thought to do it again. And when I got to the end of that range segment, I thought, well, I don't feel as tired as last time. Maybe I'll go higher than he did. And I just thought maybe I could fit in like another key or another 2 keys. And I think I ended up going like 6th higher or something.
Wow.
Yeah, I would never have thought I would be able to do that.
Wow.
Just, like that range wasn't a surprise, but I didn't think I'd do it in that context with that exercise, feeling that tired. So it's kind of a surprise. And then I think, okay, how often am I holding myself back in my own practice where I go, oh, that's enough. So that got me kind of thinking about this a little bit. I should try that again. See if it was a fluke.
Yeah. When you're do you have any process cues for yourself when you ascend? Like, for example, I know as I get higher, if things aren't working, I'm like, all right, tongue, am I rolling in? Am I staying relaxed? And there's like
Oh
certain
yeah.
feelings that I don't have names for. What are your process cues? What works for you?
Oh man. So the thing is, right, I'm a person who had such struggles with range that I ended up spending a couple of years basically working on nothing but. And so I really have like a checklist in my head. And what I would do is I would build exercises for myself, and I would go through the exercises and going higher and higher and higher, and then it would stop working. And I go, okay, because your brain can only process so much information at once, right? You can't go in, okay, there's 15 things I'm worried about. Let me do them all at once. So I'd go through my list one thing at a time. Okay.
What's the
now
checklist?
Well,
for example,
I've never actually written it out, so but I'll give you some things. But I would go through one step at a time, and if that fixes a problem, great, cool. And if it doesn't, go to the next item and you try again. And so far, I've never had a day since where it didn't work. Sometimes it takes me a while to get there, right? I mean, I suppose, if physically, like, something's really wrong, sometimes I feel really foolish, but sometimes I bite my lip when I'm eating food. And
Totally.
it's such a frustrating thing. And, then of course it's going to swell up and I might not be able to play normally, but outside of that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things. One is definitely air support, right? We can underestimate or overestimate how much air we need for the upper register. I have a friend who's an amazing lead trumpet player, one of the best, and he would black out sometimes, once almost fell off the stage, and said, oh, this started happening. Like, what do I do? So I told him, well, maybe breathe less. You don't need that much air for the upper register. And he said that fixed the problem for him. So that happens as well. But usually we underestimate for the upper register how much air we need and how much air our chops can handle. So that's a big thing of like, am I really generating air support properly? And am I adjusting it correctly as I move through the register? Another one is jaw position. That's a very personal thing. I think it's very different for everyone, but I know what I have to do. For me, my jaw moves ideally forward, a little bit to the right for the upper register, clears up, opens up the sound, and more power. It's easier. Wow. And it's about generating compression with where the mouthpiece is on your face. So everyone does it a little differently.
Generating compression?
Yeah. So like what you do with your roll in and clamp, at some level, you literally have to squeeze the lips together. And right. And where your mouthpiece is on your face and what your jaw is doing plays a role in that. So, and that is part of what we were talking about with the lips sliding over the teeth. There's an ideal place where you can maximize that compression, and it's going to be different in every register. When we did the session with Jeff, you could see him doing it very clearly as he moved into the upper register, slight shift up and to his right, assuming it wasn't mirror image. So everyone does that, and that's what I was doing wrong those years when I was struggling. I was doing it the opposite direction than I should have. So, if I move the jaw a little bit to the right and the mouthpiece a little bit to the left in the upper register, I just get that extra 5-10% of that compression. Makes it easier, feel easier up there. That's kind of a complex thing, and it's different for each player. So I don't want people to listen to this and go, oh, I'm going to try that. No, it's not going to be the same thing for you necessarily, but there are things, and that's part of what I teach. Then, literally the clamp, like what you're calling the clamp, right? Like, are you engaging the muscles to kind of bear down on the note and control this here? And it's the roll in clamp kind of thing. I kind of think of it as just one unit of just engaging this.
Can I make a differentiation?
Yeah, please.
It might be interesting. So for me, I talk about clamp as any kind of like vertical force.
Right.
Whereas roll in for me is about that. So you can roll in and clamp, you can roll in and not clamp, or you can clamp and not roll in. And I find that kind of like smushy, just vertical movement often is perhaps even more important than the roll in when we talk about normal playing.
Yeah, I think more of that than the.
Mhm.
I actually haven't thought about Roland consciously ever
Well,
until
it may give you another
recently.
octave.
I doubt, I doubt it. I feel like
Yo,
I've got
I doubted it too.
well, who knows? So then there's
Mhm.
the tongue, right? Tongue
Okay.
position. Like I like how you describe like the kick with the tongue. You know, physically, I don't know why that works. Usually people talk about the Bernoulli principle, which makes no sense in this context, but it's certainly what it feels like. You raise the tongue, kind of speeding up the air. I think that description is totally inaccurate, but that's what it feels like. What I'm doing with the mouthpiece on my face, that slight adjustment, for me, if I think of my corners going in, so instead of this
Mhm.
kind of tension, it's this kind of tension,
Mhm,
that
mhm,
helps.
mhm,
I have since learned, almost like everything else that we're talking about, that some people overdo it and they do need the opposite.
right.
So I know some people who need to rather get the corners to move out. And that's apparently a very difficult thing to do. I've never had to fight with it, so I don't know what it feels like, but apparently it's almost impossible physically. You have to train it kind of indirectly. You got to make sure you're hearing the notes and have the right sound concept. Um, Sometimes it's helpful just to listen to somebody scream on your instrument and try to imitate the sound, right? Our
Yeah,
bodies
brain soaking
can.
is what I call that.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So
Yeah.
subconsciously you're you're
Yeah.
you're taking that on.
I want to add something to that. I mean, that was a great list. First of all, thank you for sharing. And interesting about the jaw, the lateral jaw movement. I'm going to explore that a little bit. Um,
If you want, I can. You make me like a video of yourself doing some exercise. I can try to make
oh
a
yeah,
recommendation. Some people don't need any lateral jaw
yeah.
movement at all. But
Yeah, I'd be curious. I mean, at this point, I'm like so happy with my high range,
yeah, yeah, it's like,
but I'm curious, you know.
yeah, it's a it's a very very minor thing.
Yeah,
So it's not gonna change your life, I don't think,
yeah,
but can make it a little easier.
yeah. What you mentioned about brain soaking is, yeah, I've learned that you hear so much more than just sound in someone's
Mm,
state, right? You can listen to someone and say they sound relaxed or they sound tense.
right,
You don't
right.
really know why, but you can kind of hear what they're doing with their body. And I have a story that when you hear people playing brass well, you're
Mm,
actually internalizing a little bit, like your mirror neurons might actually know what they're doing with their face.
I believe that, yeah, because I find one of the hardest things is when I'm teaching bad brass players,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
I take on a lot of that.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I struggle with most, honestly, is and I know it's like an illusion in my brain, but when I'm teaching beginners or bad musicians, um, the thought that keeps coming back is, well, it doesn't sound that different when I play, right? And I really struggle with that sometimes. To
Yeah,
remind myself, like, no, this is my brain playing a trick on me because hopefully we don't sound the same. But,
yeah,
but yeah,
that's
I,
hilarious.
I feel that very much.
So the quote I'll leave everybody with is by Victor Wooten about learning
Ah,
music. And
nice.
he says, learning music is like counting to infinity. You
Whoa.
always get farther, but you never get closer.
That's a great image. You know, honestly, I think this is why I'm a musician. When I
Mhm.
was a kid, I was meeting musicians who were old, you know, like at the end of their career, and
Yeah,
every one of them said, I'm still learning, I still have so far to go, you know, I still can't do what I want to do. And to me,
yeah,
that was so inspiring.
yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. If people want to grab a lesson with you, get a jaw consult, whatever,
Yeah, gladly.
is your Instagram the best way, Bonio Praxis, to
Uh,
contact you
Instagram
there?
is great, or paul.trombone@gmail.
Paul.trombone at Gmail. Not the other Paul the trombonist, this Paul
That's
the
right.
trombonist.
That's right. This one. This one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
I'm
for
way more boring than the other guy, but hopefully I have good information too.
I think that you're both fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you.
podcast.
Really a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And let's do it again if we can.
All right, cool, man.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. This episode is brought to you by High Range Magic, my online program that helps horn players liberate their high range as well as reach new levels of relaxation and ease throughout the full range of the horn, and also to kind of reclaim a beautiful new paradigm of relationship and mindset with the instrument. If that sounds interesting to you, head over to highrangemagic.com and you can register to watch the free masterclass I have, How to Confidently Enjoy a 4+ Octave Range Without Pain, Overthinking, or Constantly Practicing. That's over at highrangemagic.com. Thanks again.